Welcome to the Daily Cannon Podcast. Hello, everybody. It's another Daily Cannon Weekly podcast. It may be the summer, the season may be over, but we're still here giving you exciting football news into your ears. I'm joined this week by Sylvain and Paul Williams. How you doing, guys?
Hello. Mate, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. There's still a hint of sun on Monday night as we record this. And we may be buying a striker, or not, which may or may not be a good thing depending on where you sit on the subject. So without any further ado, it's one of those we have to talk about Jamie moments. As we're recording this, the completion of any Jamie Vardy transfer or otherwise has not been confirmed in either direction. We were led to believe that we'd find out before he got on the plane this morning, but this hasn't happened and we are waiting. By the time you hear this, you may know one way or another, and if so, I apologise for any of the uncertainty in the content that follows.
This could be the most pointless podcast of all time.
Well, I'm sure we will still get to express some opinions about things. And obviously, if he doesn't sign for us, some of those would be rather less valid from an Arsenal perspective, but will still hold true in a broader sense.
Indeed.
How do you guys feel about it? I know that he's been a bit of a lightning rod for opinion across the Daily Cannon team and across the internet as a whole, the prospect of us signing Mr. Vardy. What do you guys think?
I'm going to let Sylvain go first because I get the feeling he feels a bit more strongly about this than I do.
Okay, so honestly, I don't think it's a very good signing. Probably good on the football side, make no mistake, but it's just the baggage that comes with him. So on that, I'm just surprised Arsene Wenger would go for him. I mean, we know they do psychological tests as well on the players, so I'm just wondering what kind of results that guy would have on the psychological side. On the football side, yeah, why not? He would complement Giroud very well, probably. Or we would have to change our style, which might be an option Arsene Wenger is looking at, actually, maybe.
Well, certainly the very fact that he's trying to buy Vardy, he's bought Xhaka suggests that there's going to be a more direct, vertical style of play, which we'd already seen at some points last season when either Welbeck was fit or Walcott wasn't shit.
Incompatible.
And I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, I don't think it's a bad thing.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I've seen a load of comments on Twitter about, we change Vardy, we have to change our style, from the same people that complain about our style of football in the first place. And I just find it maddening. I think that, having said that, I don't feel that strongly about it. I just think to myself that here is a man that scored 24 goals in 36 games last season, and you'd have to go a long way back to find an Arsenal forward that replicated that in a season. I think that Vardy, we're talking about psychological testing, we don't know obviously what the outcome of such testing would be. I look at Vardy and see someone that wants to win football matches and passionately wants to win football matches and will do whatever we know this, he'll do whatever it takes to win a football match. And I do also think if Arsenal sign him, he'll start finding those penalties become yellow cards for diving very quickly.
Maybe.
But I've been saying it for months, this Arsenal team is too nice. And I think getting someone with a bit of the Mitchell brothers about him is not a bad thing at all. He's direct, he's quick, he scores goals. It may be that this last season is a bit of a one-off, but we don't know that until we take a chance. And ultimately, every signing's a bit of a gamble.
Mm-hmm. True.
Yeah, and also, as you say, Xhaka's not exactly a shrinking violet, so he's obviously recognised that the comparative passivity and niceness of the team on the pitch may be an issue. But also, Vardy has the potential, if Vardy replicates his performance, he will kind of provide a slightly less technically advanced version of what we all hoped Theo Walcott might become in a dream world.
Yeah. I think it's interesting as well. Sorry, just to go back, talking about the psychology of it. Arsene Wenger was talking, I think it was in an interview about a month ago, about the Leicester players and how every single one of the Leicester players in that squad had suffered at some point in their career. And he sounded almost wistful about it. as if, we're talking about players like the Ox and Theo Walcott, that not that they've had it easy, but they haven't had to go through what a player like Jamie Vardy or N'Golo Kante's had to go through in their careers.
Yes.
And we've all said it at times about this Arsenal team. How much do they really want to win?
Well, it's also, it sort of feeds back into the comments that Wenger was making, I think, last September when we weren't able to buy a striker in the summer. And he was saying, well, in Europe, we don't produce strikers anymore. All the best strikers seem to be from South America, and it's partly because they've got that street fight mentality. And he was questioning whether the academy system was producing people who are very technically adept but not necessarily single-minded enough in their focus, both positionally, because they play in all kinds of positions till they're 15, 16, as opposed to being a centre forward from the age of 9. But also it sort of suggested between the lines that, yes, he was wondering whether that there was a little too much pampering and it took people from the school of hard knocks or from more underprivileged backgrounds to perhaps have the necessary fight in them to overcome odds at the highest level. And there's no doubt, looking at, every best Arsenal team we have has, not necessarily people who've come from that level of contrast, but they've all been knocked back. We've all been full of players who've gone through some, they've either been rejected by teams or they've been written off or they've had personal problems. And so many of our best players, particularly over the golden period at the start of Wenger's reign, were people who, they had a story to tell. Even if it was comparative luxury, even the very best among them, who were earmarked as geniuses from the age of kids, came to Arsenal having been rejected by someone else. And I think that desire to prove people wrong is probably quite a strong one.
Yeah.
I also think, in France we have the same problem with centre forwards, actually. The French system doesn't produce them at all because we're way too collective in terms of thinking, and centre forwards, and they should be inside the team and everything. So we don't produce goal scorer at all. It's the same problem, actually. It's probably a European problem, definitely, actually.
Well, it's one of those things also that, we were terribly spoilt with, particularly having Bergkamp and Henry, both players who could be goal scorers, but were incredibly team orientated, but were still good enough to be genuine goal scoring threats when they were at their peaks in any situation. And so that kind of, I suppose, that helped the expectation that a striker will be a collective player as well. Whereas obviously, as we've seen again this year, someone like Jermaine Defoe, doesn't know the meaning of the word pass, but he has scored goals everywhere he's played in his career. Now, admittedly, his all-round game probably isn't quite good enough, or he's not quite explosive enough for a team like Arsenal. Apart from his finishing, he's
or England.
Or England, yeah. He's not at his absolute peak now anyway. And I think actually when he was, he probably should have played for England more, just because he would have been a more reliable goal threat than some of those that they picked ahead of him. But it's by the by. Let's face it, Jermaine Defoe is basically a less good version of his hero, Ian Wright, isn't he? That's the kind of thing,
Yeah.
And to his credit, Jermaine Defoe pretty much self-defines as such as well. So when he was an Arsenal fan as a kid, someone asked him why he never played for Arsenal. He said, "I wasn't good enough. I was only good enough to play for Spurs." And of course, that's the time. And of course, that's the time when Arsenal had Bergkamp, Henry, Van Persie. So it makes sense. I suppose we have to touch on what Sylvain alluded to about the psychological testing and the other side of Mr. Vardy. Obviously we don't want to do anything that's going to incur a lawsuit. There is questions of formal conduct, and I suppose the question is, rather than getting into the nitty-gritty of that, because anyone who wants to already knows about it, I'd imagine, but how much as fans do we take that into account? Should we take that into account? And how much do figures of, I suppose, public figures and sporting heroes remain accountable for things that have happened previously?
It's a thorny one, isn't it? I think I might have said it on this podcast before, or possibly written it. I kind of feel that as much as kids do look up to footballers, basically, if you're looking to footballers to be role models, then you're you're barking up the wrong tree is the best way that I can put it. You look at the likes of John Terry, Ashley Cole, Wayne Rooney. We've had a few in our past. Tony Adams crashing a car into a garden wall at the end of a road because he's driving 12 sheets to the wind.
Who's that driving on the pavement? Who's that crashing through the wall?
And no one ever seriously, or certainly not within the football club in terms of players, staff, football fans, the media would have had a field day with Tony Adams. I don't really remember it.
It all happened quite quickly. He kind of went from being outed to sent down.
He paid for that mistake badly.
And we still won the league.
But no one ever thought that Tony Adams shouldn't play for Arsenal because he drove something into a wall. And I would suggest that being in control of a vehicle that could kill someone whilst you're paralytic is much, much worse than what Jamie Vardy did last year. As unsavoury as the comments were, and they were unsavoury, I'm not going to make an excuse for that, particularly because he might not sign for us.
Excuses will be saved until next week. I mean, what's your thoughts, Sylvain?
It's a difficult one. Huh? As Paul said, do we really have to care what they do off the pitch? If they produce on the pitch, it's a difficult balance.
I suppose for me, what I find interesting is also the broader question, which is, I mean, obviously no one, as has been all over the internet for the last part of the year, wasn't he unlucky? He got caught that one time he did something racist, whatever. But, and no one's suggesting that you isolate incidents and forget them entirely. But I also think that the reaction to it's partly a kind of part of our broader culture we have at the moment, which is we like to have pariahs. And we like to, it almost goes back to burning people for being unpleasant in the 12th century. It's the kind of thing of, with house and sea you believe it is up to you. But he apologised and he underwent some sort of basically retraining himself to be a better human being, and ultimately he's done what you're supposed to do. So I always thought, even as Arsenal fans, when he was scoring against us or diving winning penalties against whatever, I always thought the moralising about it was a bit, how far do you take it? If someone does something wrong that doesn't result in any permanent damage to any other person, how long do you hold it against them? It's not like John Terry or beating people up. Although Vardy's got a bit of previous for that, apparently.
We can't sit here and be all moral about it because we've got Jack Wilshere in the team, who everyone loves, and he does something absolutely stupid. Every 6 months he's in the papers for this, that, the other. I've heard stories about Jack Wilshere that I won't repeat. I don't want to get anyone into trouble, least of all myself. But they're absolutely awful stories, and you just think... the story I've heard, by the way, didn't make it into the papers.
I gathered that.
Yeah. And they're just like, you think, I am a bit embarrassed that this guy represents my football club, as good as he is. As a friend of mine put it, who's Luke, the Everton fan, but also an England fan, he may be a see you next Tuesday, but he's our see you next Tuesday.
Sounds a bit like how Chelsea fans used to talk about their black players in the 80s.
So I just think like Jamie Vardy did something a bit silly and unsavoury. Like you say, I mean, if he's gone and tried to remedy that in some way, it's to be applauded. I mean, Jack Wilshere shows no signs of actually trying to remedy any of his behaviour. He got caught with a cigarette, said, "Oh, sorry, I won't do that again," and then a year later he's caught again. How stupid is he?
But again, obviously it's the nature of what's happened, which is why there's a difference of opinion as well. Jack being accused of having a bit of a scuffle in a club, but no one can really prove anything, or smoking a cigarette. I suppose it's something which is easier to dismiss because it doesn't have the same social weight in a way. But at the same time, I suppose, yes, we'd all prefer it if any player playing for us had a clean rap sheet. And obviously there are certain things that if were to happen, you don't defend in any way. And of course, no one's defending what he did last summer, and I'm glad it happened while he was playing for another team if he is to sign for us. And I sincerely hope it never happens while he's playing for us. But I suppose it leads me on to the thought of question of is how much has people's reaction to that, particularly online, of late, been due to this impending transfer and how they feel about the transfer from a footballing perspective? Because obviously when the Leicester fairy tale was in full swing towards the end of the season, no one was mentioning this stuff.
Yeah,
so
it's interesting. I think I kind of alluded to that in a piece I wrote, which was published on Sunday about Vardy. People have got reservations about him as a person. People have got reservations about whether he's an Arsenal-type footballer or good enough for Arsenal. And a lot of people are just conflating both of those opinions on Vardy. And I don't know. I mean, I think I understand people being instinctively kind of appalled by Vardy. On some level, I don't agree with it, but I do understand it. Incidentally, I should say that I did email my uncle earlier today. I wanted to know what I thought, so I emailed my uncle.
Yeah.
He didn't get back to me, so I'm left only with my own opinion today. I imagine that my uncle would see this potential signing as a good move. And again, my friend Luke, the Everton fan, said to me, you can't start next season with Giroud leading the line. We need something else. And I know I've taken that away from what we were talking about.
Well, it is an interesting balancing, isn't it? The excitement of the shiny new toy, but also a lot of people feeling a sense of disappointment that it's not the shiny new toy you wanted.
Well, it is that thing of damned if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, we talked about this a lot at the start of the season just gone, because I understood why Arsenal didn't sign a striker last year. There wasn't anyone available. It was simple as that. No one who needed a big striker last season got a new striker because no one moved. So we've had to maybe step down a level. But I don't see signing the Premier League champions top goal scorer who got, let me say it again, 24 goals in 36 games. That's 2 goals every 3 games, exactly.
Yeah, it's really static.
As a bad thing,
Yeah, it's surprising Leicester will lead in goal, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, if he didn't have a release clause, they wouldn't be. But I suppose Leicester also, they're operating in a different reality where, a bit like the Van Persie situation for us a few years ago, although the contractual situation is slightly different, but, that amount of money for a player at that age, if you're in a bit of financial difficulty, is hard to say no to. I think, obviously, if there wasn't a release clause, they'd probably be after an extra 10 million on top of what we're likely to be paying for him. But, I mean, it's also the thing of, when it comes to the alternative, it's so much of the definition of people's desired alternatives is defined by the media, in that the Alvaro Morata links have been going on for so long that there's a lot of people who've decided that he's the one. But I was doing just in a space of five minutes little digging today. His goal scoring record and assists record and number of appearances made and goals per minute and assists per minute and international football record and the difficulty of competition are worse in every single category than Nicklas Bendtner was at the same age.
That's not what I was expecting you to
Good old Nicklas.
So at the age that Morata is now, Bendtner had played about another almost half as many, again, top flight appearances, and on top of that, another season in the Championship. He had scored almost twice as many goals at a better ratio, almost twice as many assists at a better ratio, and had scored 18 international goals as opposed to 3.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And yet people are convinced that spending 50 million quid on Morata is the future. Now, I do think that Morata will have a better long-term career than Bendtner because A, he's not a nutcase, B, he's less likely to crash his car, lose what pace he had, and then be found walking around in his underpants. But at the same time, if that's the market where people are telling us that £50 million buys you someone who basically, yes, he's scored in some big games for Juve, but actually his career isn't that impressive compared to other strikers at the same age, then where the hell does it go from there, really?
Better get Griezmann at 50 million, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to spend 50 million on Morata, you might as well spend a little bit more on someone who is a lot more proven. I mean, I know that a lot of people, quite rightly question the capacity of Romelu Lukaku to consistently trap a football, but the guy scores goals more than probably Morata ever will, even though his overall link-up play probably isn't quite as good. And obviously his physical attributes allow him to bring things to the team that others wouldn't. And Everton are talking about wanting 65 million for him, which means they're not going to get 65 million for him. So why the hell would you buy Morata, who's never set foot in England and is largely unproven except for the last season and a half at Juve, for 50 million when you could buy Lukaku for 55? I just don't see it.
Can I just say on Nicklas Bendtner, my friend Luke, who also lives in Copenhagen, spotted Nicklas on the Danish version of They Think It's All Over. I don't think it's an exact copy of it, but at the weekend, I said to him, it is all over for that guy, isn't it? And he said, yeah, it is. It's sad, I think.
It's really strange as well, because even when his club career was dwindling, I mean, as little as just over a year ago, he got a hat-trick against, I think, the USA, a really well-taken hat-trick for the national team. Scored in the opening game of the season for Wolfsburg this season, and then has barely kicked a ball for anyone since anywhere, and seems to basically no longer be a footballer, which is... I mean, I remember that, all the criticism Wenger got for the size of the contract that Bendtner got, whatever the famous 52 grand as measured on his shirt. But at the time, in terms of his record and in terms of his efficiency, despite the flaws in his game, he was one of the best young strikers in Europe. The problem is he then deteriorated really quickly within about a year of that.
His brain cell deteriorated.
But also physically as well. I mean, there you can actually see a relatively clear correlation in before that crash he had and afterwards. Now, whether that was psychological or whether it had any physical effect, I don't know. But basically, he was never going to be good enough to be Arsenal's main man. But, he should have been a reliable bench option, good for 15 goals a season at least. But
I always thought he was a better player than he was given credit for being. He just wasn't as good as he thought he was. That was the problem there.
I mean, actually, if you analyse Bendtner as a footballer, the variety of goals he scored for us were really good. Obviously we're very aware of the fact that he's 6'4" and pretty bloody good in the air. To be honest, he's actually a very good header of the football. But, there's 3 or 4 times where he's pinging them in from 25 yards out or racing past defenders to control long punts upfield and finish past the goalkeeper. I mean, as I say, as a 22, 23-year-old, he probably was a better centre-forward than Morata is now. And I mean that genuinely, which is kind of extraordinary when you consider where he is now. And such a shame for Arsenal, of course, because he would have been, albeit Danish, he'd have been homegrown as well. But then he went mad. Oh well, the demise of Nicklas Bendtner. Obviously, it's hard to kind of talk too much about the Vardy transfer until it either happens or doesn't. But I mean, what do you think about the broader implications, I suppose, of us buying Xhaka and hopefully Vardy within?
Well, I think it's when we last spoke, talking about Arsenal doing things early. Xhaka coming to season had barely finished and we've signed Xhaka and hoping that it wasn't going to be like seasons past where it's like we make one big signing and then take the rest of the summer off. And I think whether Vardy comes or not, the signs are that it isn't going to be just the one. It looks like they mean business in the transfer market. It certainly sounded like reading Tim Stillman's transcript of the Ivan Gazidis Q&A, as much as what he said was blandishments, that there is a real intention at Arsenal this summer to actually go and do what they need to do. And actually, maybe they know what they need to do this summer, which might be the most important thing. Yeah, at least the most important thing.
I mean, I'm going to ask you your thoughts in a second, Sylvain, but that's a very good point, because I think... Well, we've already ad infinitum mentioned young Theo, but, there are, I don't know, a few options that were in kind of let's have one more go at it territory. And, either succeeded or didn't, shall we say. I mean, what's your thoughts, Sylvain, about the activity so far and the rumoured activity to come?
Yeah, it's quite good to start early, and yeah, definitely I would expect more signing because if they have analysed all the failures from this season, they know that there's a lot of players to be added to really be able to compete for the title. So you really hope they're gonna sort the cash machine basically. And
even Gazidis is at the bank. 50s.
50s? You must be joking. This is Arsenal. 5, 10, 15.
Yeah. Hopefully they will have properly analysed the whole season and see what went right, what went wrong, and obviously some players are leaving as well, so they need replacement.
Well, it's interesting. This I picked up the Evening Standard on the way home tonight, and on the very back page, there's another story about Theo Walcott and West Ham. And I know one of the West Ham owners' son tweeted to say that they're not interested in Walcott, but I don't think they'd be advertising the fact that they are interested if they are. But that seems like a link that's not going away. Interestingly, the same agent is involved with the Vardy transfer.
Yeah, I mean, what I find quite interesting is, as well, I mean, we're used to the kind of random transfer rumour generator going haywire at this point of the season every bloody year. But what I'm finding interesting, and I mean, obviously they won't all come to fruition, but the players to whom we are linked beyond the two that we obviously know about are incredibly consistent across the board and have been for some time as well. There's this Henrik Mkhitaryan at Dortmund, who people have been making noises about us, at least making inquiries about him for as early as last year, or maybe even before that, I can't remember. And of course now, a lot of the newspapers seem to have determined that we're going to buy him, particularly as he hasn't renewed his contract at Dortmund. There's Ricardo Rodriguez, the left back from Wolfsburg, who's Xhaka's teammate, who is very different to a prototypical Wenger left back. So I don't know how much to look into that one.
He's desperate to come, isn't
he? Yeah. I mean, talk about lifting your skirts, Jesus. He's not standing on the street corner; he's chasing the car down the road, isn't he?
Yeah. It's good if a player really wants to come,
Yeah.
So was it Sebastian Frey that kept saying, I want to come to Arsenal, I want to come to Arsenal every year for about 10 years, and it never happened.
Well,
was it him?
Yeah, the goalkeeper, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't quite good enough, to be honest. Yeah, we did have our period of there was about 3 players that were linked to us every summer, like Philippe Mexes being another. It, as you say, it is very positive, Sylvain, that there are these players that do want to join us, and it's good to know that no matter what sense of disappointment we may feel at different times as a fan base, the club's allure to anyone outside of the 5 European super duper clubs remains seemingly undiminished, which can only be a positive thing. You're talking about the Gazidis Q&A that, as you brought it up, Paul. I mean, I don't know if you got to see any of this, Sylvain, or if you saw much of it, Paul. I mean, I saw a little bit of video from it a couple of times from a couple of different sources, and it seems like Gazidis was getting a bit of a grilling. It seemed like even though there weren't that many questions, they made him work harder this year than is previously the case. And obviously, he was keeping his cards close to his chest, but did talk specifically about learning from mistakes, and then almost said that Wenger had made a mistake not buying one last summer, but then tried to rephrase it so it didn't sound like that because he didn't want to be overstepping the mark. But certainly it seems that the club do recognise what the fans have been saying.
Yeah, there was a certain amount of blandishment, but I think there probably had to be. He can't come out and talk about transfer targets and things like this. I'm sort of regretting bringing it up because it was a long kind of transcript that Paul Tim's written, and I haven't taken notes. It's kind of a shame that he has to come out and say, basically, we are trying, because that should be taken as read. there's also, it seems to me, a little bit of hostility. One of the things that I do remember from the Q&A is someone said, talking about the investment in data analytics, and they said someone said something along the lines of, I spent 45 quid on FIFA last year and I get a load of data. And I was like, well, we wouldn't have spent all that money on data analytics if we knew we could have just done that. But it's, I mean, obviously the person was being only slightly serious.
Yeah.
But possibly making a point nonetheless.
Well, that's an interesting point you raise, actually, because data analytics is a bone of contention in a lot of sports, and obviously in American sports, which are, as you know very well, are massively statistically driven. You know, I'm a big ice hockey fan, and in that area there's a lot of quite vibrant, shall we say, debate on both sides about the value of data analytics, and some people are swearing by it and are basing their modus operandi about it, and others are refusing to. And obviously it's such a new science in terms of application to sport that no one really has any empirical evidence whether it works or not. But I think surely a club like Arsenal should at least, should be applauded for, or at least expected to try and investigate it and see if it helps, because we're one of the biggest clubs in the world. If we can't try and get any competitive advantage we can, I mean, Jesus, if old Walrus Face up at Sunderland has been doing it for the last 5 years, if we can't keep up in terms of innovation with Sam Allardyce at whatever club he's currently saving from relegation for this year or next, then where the hell is our ambition? So I think anyone sort of questioning that is barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah, I guess there's maybe it's legitimate to question how whatever data they get is analysed and interpreted, and what conclusions you can draw from it. Obviously, we all know the truism, there are lies and damn statistics. I mean, Arsenal's expected goals was off the scale last season, wasn't it? And yet we had one of our worst seasons for scoring goals in the Premier League since Arsene took over.
Yeah, what I think, is data analysis is very important. If you use it very well, actually, if you look in the context, for example, I was at the England ladies game on Saturday, and one of the players had poor GPS stats, actually, apparently. And she didn't run much or stuff like that. And because she plays in the number 10 position, so she didn't do like a usual 14 kilometers running during the game, and probably 10. So if it's badly utilized, you would think that girl is lazy and she doesn't do shit. And when it's reality, she had a very good game. So it's really the way they're using the data to analyze the players and everything in the context.
Yeah, context is everything, as with all things in life. One thing that Gazidis, has clearly been driving is the development of the club behind the scenes. I mean, we all like to think of ourselves as supporting the greatest club in the world for obvious reasons, but we have been bypassed in a number of areas by other clubs. There is no doubt that in terms of behind the scenes work, the vast, stupendous investments by Man City and Chelsea, and to a lesser degree people like Bayern Munich, have kind of caught us off guard a little bit, because they ended up, Man City came in with these owners and with the intention of taking over football and put their money where their mouth was into every aspect of the club. And obviously, if we want to avoid being left behind, we have to act accordingly. Which kind of vaguely, this is a bit of a tenuous link, but I'm going to go with it, sort of brings me to one of the things I wanted to kind of observe about the prospect of buying Vardy, or at least ask your opinions about, because of course he's 29, which means by the end of next season he'll be 30. And obviously...
Good maths.
Yeah, hooray, I know. I didn't get a degree for nothing.
Same.
Well, perhaps I did get a degree for nothing, and that's the point. I don't know. Anyway, take what lesson you want from it, kids. The very fact that I'm here doing this. Anyway, we're spending that much money and on a player of that age. Obviously, we've spoken about the paucity of the striker market, but is that an issue for either of you?
For me, no. It'll be an issue if it doesn't work out, which would be a terrible comment to make. But hindsight is always 20/20, and I can sit here now and say I think signing Jamie Vardy at 29 years old for £20 million is a good move. But obviously, there's a proviso attached to that.
That he scores goals.
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard. I understand why Arsenal are doing it. I do. And I like the fact that we're trying something different, something unexpected. I don't want to say I think it's a masterstroke, but I think he could turn out to be a really good signing. And certainly the media I've read around the transfer today seem to be of that opinion too. I'm waffling and have totally forgotten what you asked.
Well, you've kind of answered it anyway, so well done.
Good.
Yeah, it's... I mean, if he can give us like 2 good years, we have younger strikers to come in like 1 or 2 seasons who can work around. So if he gets us a lot of goals for 2 years, that would be good actually, and a good investment basically. Yeah,
the other thing actually, I think, and again I made this point in the piece I wrote, is that Danny Welbeck is obviously going to miss basically all of next season. If Vardy gets us through next season, again assuming we sign him, I should stop saying that. All of this is predicated on assuming he signs. But if Vardy can score the goals that helps us to get through that year without Danny Welbeck, in a year's time Welbeck's back, hopefully he comes back as good as he was looking when he was back in February, March. To me, it's got to be worth the gamble. I mean, in a way, I don't even think Vardy has to score 25 goals a season next year for us, as long as he scores enough goals to win the title. If he only scored 10 goals, but they won us 10 games 1-0, you know?
Well, it's
obviously, I'd like a few more than that, obviously, but you see the point I'm making.
Yeah, and it's also having an alternative to Olivier Giroud, who isn't either injured or playing absolute pony, which is where we have been for since about November of this season. When as soon as Walcott's form dropped off, it just meant that we had to play Giroud every week, regardless of where he was at, and he struggled man free for a while. But we all know he blows hot and cold, so I don't think the expectation would be on Vardy to be the lone saviour. Obviously we'd all like to find the next Thierry Henry and have someone that turns up and gives us 7 years of world-class service. But, if you know where that person is, please send suggestions to Mr. Wenger, care of Emirates Stadium, because I'm...
playing for Charlton at the moment?
Oh, dear. Well... Yes.
Do you know, I liked Yaya Sanogo. I liked his kind of chaotic style, but he's starting to look a bit like George Ware's cousin, isn't he? Well, not George Ware's cousin, more to the point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If he wasn't for free, if we'd spent any real money on him, it would have been a bit reminiscent of when George Graham was losing the plot and went out and bought Chris Kiwomya and Glenn Helder and people like that.
I saw Chris Kiwomya's debut.
Lucky you.
He scored the winning goal against Nottingham Forest. It was the day George Graham got sacked.
Yeah, I know. That worked out well for both parties, didn't it? Because Chris Kiwomya was gone within about a year and then was pretty much never heard of again.
Glenn Helder's debut that night was amazing.
Yeah, well, Glenn Helder did have about 5 amazing games. He was just shit the rest of the time, sadly.
Yeah.
No, he was a random cross generator, wasn't he? It's like, will it go into the 6-yard box onto John Hartson's forehead, or will it go into the upper tier of the opposite stand? You can't tell. Spin the wheel.
They were the days, eh?
Yeah, Jesus. At least that's it. Whenever people start losing their shit too much about the team at the moment, I always just go Eddie McGoldrick, David Hillier, John Jensen, Mark Flats. That was our midfield.
Yeah, it is funny actually, going back then. I think a few people have said, can you imagine if we'd had Twitter when Arsenal signed Ian Wright at 27? And I vividly remember Ian Wright talking about how the Arsenal fans were singing "What a Waste of Money" at him on his debut. And then Wrighty's killer line was, they didn't sing it after that game.
I have to say that surprises me, because I remember even being a kid, when we saw it Ian Wright for that much money, before even his first game, I was like, that's a great signing. I'd only seen him play about 3 or 4 times, but I just thought he's got it, whatever it is, and I don't really understand what the mechanics of it is, but he's got it. I had complete faith in the manager on that one. But that might be just because I liked him anyway. You know, I liked Wrighty when he played for Palace. And I actually went down to Palace and saw him play a couple of times, and ball getting stuck on the roof of Sainsbury's every time it got kicked out.
Strange ground.
Halcyon days.
Yeah. Hey, do you want to feel old?
Go on then.
It was 25 years in September we signed Wrighty.
Okay. That doesn't actually make me feel as old as when I realised that I'd seen Kevin Campbell's first and last games as professional football live, and I'd seen him break into the Arsenal team as a teenager and then seen him retire as the oldest member of his team as a journeyman. that sort of marked the passing of time.
Yeah, I suppose that would, wouldn't it?
It's also when you see all the players that were your heroes, you know, growing up, and, you know, apart from the ones that are still in fairly public eye, you occasionally see like glimpses of Martin Hayes or people, and you think, oh God, you've got fat and old, haven't you?
Yeah. Patrick Vieira's face seems to be expanding sideways every time I see him. That's really weird.
He's storing all that oil money.
At least Thierry still looks like Thierry, you know?
Fast food in New York.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah, good point.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of started talking about bollocks, really, which is probably an indication of, actually, despite all the Vardy excitement, until it happens, there's not a great deal else to talk about. I did want to pick up on what you'd mentioned about the age not being an issue with Vardy. I mean, it's partly because, as you say, Welbeck will be coming back, hopefully, fingers crossed, as good as new. And as Sylvain points out, we do have some exciting attacking players in the academy. 2 or 3 strikers. We've definitely got the best crop of centre-forwards in the youth setup that we've had in a long time. And maybe one of them will make it. But I think it even comes down to something much more fundamental, really, which is we're at a stage as a club where we just need to buy people who can do it now.
Yeah.
And actually, what happens in 3 years can be worried about in 3 years' time, because ultimately we have
another manager.
Yeah, possibly. Well, exactly. It might be Arsenal's last splurge, but it's a thing of, for a club like Arsenal, particularly with a new TV deal, 20 million's peanuts for someone who you expect to be a significant first-team contributor. And ultimately, if United get Zlatan, even on a 1-year deal, his wages will almost equal Vardy's transfer fee. And we all know about how I have serious Zlatan man love, but even I can recognise the fact that the guy is not the striker Arsenal need, because he hasn't got the mobility we need anymore. You know, the mobility he had as a 23-year-old combined with the technical ability he has now will be perfect, but those two things do not coexist.
Can I ask a serious question?
You can try.
Is Manchester big enough for Jose Mourinho's ego and Zlatan Ibrahimovic's ego to be in the same place at the same time? I know they've been building up the Theatre of Dreams for a long time. I don't think it's big enough.
Well, they seem to really like each other, which is kind of like, so maybe that'll help. I don't know. You know, Zlatan always is talking about how great Mourinho is, and he made me feel like a lion, or whatever, all the nonsense he comes out with. But
yes, they worked together before, so they know each other. And
also, United, don't really have too many stars to have their noses put out of joint at the moment. They've got their least kind of high-profile, big egos first 11. You've got Rooney's is actually sort of no longer at the apex of his ability, and B, seems to be maturing into a relatively calm bloke, apart from his screaming at the ref.
Apart from that,
well, we all want to scream at the ref sometimes, so I'm not going to kind of judge someone just on the basis of that. And there aren't that many particularly big characters at United, so much as I'd like to see it all end in tears and flames, it kind of makes sense to me. I think Zlatan to United, particularly with the players they have around him, makes a lot more sense than coming to North London, even though I've always wanted him to play for us. Partly because with Zlatan you need lots of people in the forward lines who can run around quickly in close vicinity. And we need our striker to be someone who can run around quickly. We've already got one very good team-linking centre-forward who's not quite up to Zlatan standard, but is a bit less of a nutcase. We need someone different, hence the reason we're going for Vardy. Ta-da!
Yeah, seamless.
So yeah, there we go. It all makes sense. There is a plan somewhere, maybe, perhaps. I did like the stories being leaked in the papers today that apparently Vardy was offered to us a month ago, and we said no, and then we changed our mind. Which, who knows if there's any truth to it, but would certainly be a reflection of the striker market in Europe as is.
Yeah, I think that's the thing for me. There is not much world-class talent out there. So, as I said earlier, maybe just go down a level and get the next best thing. And if Jamie Vardy's that, then Jamie Vardy's that, and so be it. I'm quite excited to have someone like Jamie Vardy potentially playing up front for us, and I think Mesut Ozil, Vardy could be a striker that gets the best out of him, because I think we'd all agree that perhaps Ozil might be being a little bit wasted playing behind Olivier Giroud.
Yeah, then, without denigrating Giroud in any way, who I think is a massively underrated footballer, his natural strengths don't match up best with Sanchez or Ozil. I mean, certainly Sanchez will be happy, because Sanchez seems to only play at his best when he's in the vicinity of a centre-forward who's almost as quick as he is. Sanchez seems to link best with Danny Welbeck out of all our striking options, and also seems to understand Walcott quite well, but never quite clicked in the same way with Giroud leading the line. So, that gives us more options if it happens, and we'll wait and see if it does. Have we reached a natural conclusion?
All I'm going to say is Giroud is going to top score the Euros, and France will win it.
Well, you've told us that before, and I actually think Giroud being top scorer at the Euros is definitely worth a cheeky bet, actually.
Yeah, I'm putting my tenner tonight.
Ah, boom. Allez! Yeah. Allez, Olivier. Have you heard his latest thing? He says if France win the Euros, he'll dye his beard red, white and blue.
What a muppet.
Surely he was joking. Surely.
They do stupid things when they win tournaments, those football players. Huh?
I remember half the Arsenal fans in North London, including a certain Harry Kane, spray painting red mohicans into their hair after a certain Freddie Ljungberg did his magic. So
it's funny, isn't it? No one's looked as good as Freddie's did. I wonder why that was.
Yeah, but there's a reason that not only was Freddie an elite level athlete, but he was also a professional model. He's an incredibly good-looking bloke, and most of football fans aren't. And also most football fans are going to dye their hair and not going to go to several £100 salon.
Yeah, you could see the difference.
It's not one of those sort of DIY spray paint jobs, which I have to confess, out of my Arsenal mates, I was the only one that didn't partake. Partly because with my hair, I'd need enough hairspray to basically remove my own personal section of the ozone layer for it to work, because my hair is blacker than the colour of night. So, yeah, or not, depending on how you feel about it. Right, well, we're definitely moved into bollocks territory, so it's time to go, kids. Well, thanks, Sylvain and Paul. Thank you for gracing me with your voices and ears, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And hopefully, by the time you listen to this, some of what we say in this last half hour or so will be vaguely relevant. Have a good week, all. Bye bye.